Hi, my name is Michael Thomas Kane, and I'm the founder of Forgotten Artist Productions. And today I wanted to talk to you about a course that we're offering titled Literature as Activism for Injustice. And we've put this course together as a result of a lot of various things that are happening in the world today. I've been teaching in the college classroom for roughly 12 years, and one of my specialties is teaching literature and critical thinking and digging up all of the meaning um, out of a piece of literature, right? Sort of reading between the lines of the text and critically thinking about it and unearthing all of the meaning, pulling back all of the layers that literature can offer us. And the great thing about literature is it is an art form and it's a craft, it's an expression, it's a voice from various writers. And through the years, I've taught quite a bit of literature, and I'll admit I have taught a lot of literature that speaks to me, that really means something to me, that I think has a lot of power and becomes more than just literature or writing, but it becomes a form of expression and activism and voice for making us aware of problems and maybe even becoming a call to action for change as a result of inequalities and injustices. And a lot of the literature that I've taught through the years, I have picked myself because I enjoy it and for the reasons I've already expressed and outlined. Um, and I'm passionate about those pieces, right? And a lot of them deal with the themes of inequality and injustice. And through the years, um, I always, for every class that I teach, there are always a couple of students in there that may voice the opinion of, wow, I really get that, because some of that is still happening today, right? And I do like to compare certain pieces of literature that were written 60, 80, 100 years ago, to events that are still happening today. And we can find correlations and connections between the two. Um, and that's what good literature is, it's timeless. The message is timeless. It still speaks to us today. And it's powerful, even those things that were written 60, 80, 100 years ago, right? But we can still, as human beings, see the relevance in the material and see ourselves as human beings in the material. The interesting thing is just here in the last couple of years, I'm starting to see more and more students and people um, voice. It's not just a couple, it is a lot of students voice that, wow, that literature that was written, that message that was written 60 or 80 years ago, I see it. I've experienced it. That is me, right? So some of this literature, which does, become a voice and take on this role of activism, right? Um, we can look to it. We can learn from it. Um, we can use it, right? We can decide how we're going to use it. It can motivate us. It can empower us, right? To speak out or create change for something different, to generate something different for tomorrow, right? And so because I'm starting to see more and more people relate to some of this stuff that was written, some of it was written so long ago, I thought it was extremely important and relevant to, offer this material at this particular point in time of where we are as a society. And that's why we, as Forgotten Artist Productions, have put together this course titled Literature as Activism for Injustice. And so, what we're going to do in this course is we're going to study various pieces, genres of literature, from fiction to essays, nonfiction, to plays, to a little bit of poetry, right? And some of these pieces are very famous and have stood the test of time, and they have powerful messages, right? Um, Demonstrating the human experience that's, not always a pleasant journey, but yet a journey we have to take. And so I want to introduce the course to you today, as something for you to think about and consider for your own journeys, and perhaps you'd be interested in taking the course. So what I'd like to do for you today is just a little mini lesson to give you a little bit of an idea or flavor of what we'll be tackling in the course and what we'll be doing. What we always do is we do sort of look at these pieces in terms of structure and technique a little bit. Not as much as we would in another course, but a little bit, because sometimes by just simply understanding the structure of the technique, it makes it a little easier for us to see and find what it is that we need to see and find, especially if you don't have a lot of experience sort of critically thinking about and analyzing literature, right? I mean, the whole point is to find the meaning, right? To find the voice, to hear what it is that you need to hear. So sometimes we just need to understand the mechanics of it all um, in order to find what we need to find. So, you know, we'll be looking at the pieces with that in mind, but more importantly, right, the purpose of it all is to analyze and critically think about it, to find the meaning, right? And by finding the meaning, that's our big takeaway, right? That is the experience, and then from there, we can decide what we're going to do with that knowledge, right? Um, and you may do anything with it. You may just keep it for your own growth. You may apply it to something in your life. Um, it might even motivate you to write your own literature that becomes a piece of activism, right? So let's just have a little mini lesson here to give you an idea and an example of, what we'll be doing in the course. And so for this, I have picked I've picked a poem by Langston Hughes. Right, Langston Hughes is one of the premier voices in American literature. Um, his life and his literature, they are, you know, have come to represent activism, right? Um, and so, for these purposes, I've chosen "The Negro Speaks of Rivers," right? And it's just a short little poem. And let me just read this for you quickly, a time or two, just to give you, um, an idea of what's going on here, and then we'll talk about it just a little bit. All right. So this is titled "The Negro Speaks of Rivers" by Langston Hughes. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I'm going to read that for you just one more time because poems go so quickly, and I just want to make sure that you have um, images in your head to draw from as we talk about it. The Negro Speaks of Rivers by Langston Hughes. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. Now, one thing I ask of you here is to maybe start thinking about and considering simply what you think is happening in this poem. But let's just together sort of talk about this. Now, one of the things that I'd like you to realize when it comes to Langston Hughes's poetry, whether it be this one or any piece, is that there's a duality to it. There are two things that are happening in the poem. He is truthfully, honestly drawing our attention to a problem, right? And let's face it, all literature has to have a problem. It has to have a conflict, right? If you study, just basic storytelling and basic plot structure, you know that you have to have some kind of conflict or problem, right? That's why we're reading it, to sort of see what that is and to see if we can do something about it. Or at the least, just sort of see what happens, right? So Langston Hughes always honestly and truthfully draws our attention to a problem. And for Langston Hughes and everything we know about him, and again, sometimes we just need to know something about the writer and who they are and what they represent, and the time period that they lived in, and the social, political, and economic climate of that time period. And by understanding that, the person and the history, right, that can help us find the meaning and message in a piece of literature, and that is the case. Now, we know that Langston Hughes is always, not always, but most of the time, a lot of the time, speaking of the Black experience through history, right, and calling our attention to inequalities and injustices when it comes to that, right, this unfairness between Black and white, right. A lot of his poems represent that. At the same time, there's usually this message or feeling of hope, right, for tomorrow. A hope for change for tomorrow, right? And I would say that's present in a lot of his poems. I think that's present in this poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. I think it's present in another famous poem of his titled I Too. I think it's present in Let America Be America again, right? Drawing our attention to the problem, but also providing us hope for tomorrow, right? So let's just sort of look at, what's being said here. And, there are a few different things happening here, right? And so, I could start off by asking, well, who is the narrator here? Who's speaking? Who is the voice? Because it's saying, I've known rivers, I bathed in the Euphrates, I built my hut, right? And it could be maybe one person saying that they've done and seen all of this, right? But then again, it may be even more than that, right? So what is being expressed here, right? I've known rivers, ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood and human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers, right? I've bathed in the Euphrates. I've built my hut near the Congo. I looked up the Nile. I heard the singing of the Mississippi. So what's being talked about here? And, on a poetic level, right? And if you want to start talking about, symbols or metaphors or what have you when it comes to literature, I think you can start to find them here in this piece, right? The narrator or the person is talking about a journey taken through life, right? The way a human being would do, right? Going through life and having all of these experiences over a lifetime, from the time you're born until the time you die, you're going to see and do all of these things that sort of, you know, make us who we are, right? That sort of, you know, give us this complexity to ourselves, right? And by doing that, we become richer, you know, deeper, you know, wiser. You know, when you think of sort of an elderly person at the end of their lives, at the end of their life, you think of them as being wiser as a result of experience, right? So if we sort of take that and connect it to this idea of the river, well, what is a river, right? Um, you know, it's something on Earth that is continuously flowing, twisting and turning, continuously over a large area, right? Um, and we, as you know, don't necessarily see it as ending. It's just continuous, you know, through a area, you know. And you know, the deeper that you go into that river, the more that you'd be able to discover, right? And it's twisting and turning through, you know, space and time, I guess, you know. And so the river almost becomes symbolic, or maybe a metaphor for life's journey, right? And you know, how deep could that be, right? And so I think that's part of it here, but there's something greater, right? There's something greater, right? The river is also referring to famous rivers or bodies of water on the planet Earth: the Euphrates, the Congo, the Nile, the Mississippi, right? In each line, there's a different location, a different place, a different river that tells different stories and has different experiences, right? And so we have to question, as the reader, well, where are those places and what are the experiences, and why has Langston Hughes presented these particular places or these particular rivers, right? And what are we supposed to sort of think? Because they're also, you know, when you're dealing in time, it's not the same time, right? If you sort of look at it carefully, you're talking about, I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it, right? So you're thinking about a certain time period. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans. You're talking about a different time or a different time period and a different experience. Now, one human being, unless you have some kind of superpowers or capabilities that the rest of us aren't aware of, the average human being can't be in all of those places at one time, right? So we have to sort of think, well, how is I doing that? One I. And they're not. It's impossible. So what does that mean? Well, Langston Hughes, again, and we just have to know who he is and what he's expressing, you know. He's transcending one person and one person's experience to speak to the whole, meaning an entire culture, an entire race, right? The entire Black experience through history since the beginning of time. All of their experiences, all of the Black experience through history, through all of time, since the beginning of time, right? He has, in a sense, in just a few lines, is representing all of the Black experience through time in all of these places. And all of these places, if we think about the Black experience in these places, you know, if you think about the Nile and raised the pyramids, who built the pyramids, really and truly? I mean, who physically built the pyramids? Slaves, right? You're talking about the Black experience through history since the beginning of time, right? And that journey taken. or that river taken as a metaphor or symbol, right? So you're talking about life, slavery, abolishment of slavery. He doesn't really cover it in here. He probably does it in other poems, but then he would, in maybe another poem, even go into segregation and so on and so forth through time, right? And so that's what's being presented to us is the Black experience through time, all of time, since the beginning of time, and all of these locations. You know, their experience, at these rivers, dealing with slavery or, you know, the Black experience, right? And if you think about that journey, right, as an entire race, that journey as an entire race, and then bring in the idea of the river, right, and how strong and true that is through all the twists and turns that a river may take, and how it's choppy and rough, and then smooths out, and then gets rough and choppy again, right, and sort of having to maneuver your way through the river, you know then the river becomes sort of the metaphor or symbol for the journey of the Black experience through time. And all of that is deep, right? It's deep like the rivers, right? There's a certain, things are solidified in that, um, you know. And so we have to sort of think in the big picture, you know, what's being expressed here, right? I mean, Langston Hughes is calling our attention to the Black experience at these places, which, you know, have not always been, the best circumstances, right? But another thing, if you sort of read between the lines and you know what he's expressing in his poetry, and again with the duality, knowing that that's usually present in his work, there's also sort of this sense of pride, all right, of having been present in history, in time, at all of these locations, a sense of pride in the work and accomplishment that has taken place. Yes, granted, the problem is that, we did this work possibly as slaves, but we have also helped build history. We have helped since the beginning of time, since ancient times, we have been here, whether you've been willing to acknowledge it or not, whether you've seen us as equal or not, whether you've exploited us or not. We have been here since the beginning of time, ancient times, and we have contributed to the process. We have contributed to the history. We have helped build history, whether you're willing to acknowledge it or not. And so, with that, there's a sense of pride, which makes the idea of the strength of the river, right? And the strength of the journey through the river, even that much more powerful, whether it be for the I, the current generation, or that I representing all the other generations that have come before it, right? And so in just a few lines, in a very short poem, there's a lot of meaning representing the Black experience and the inequality and injustice, that, has come with that, right? But there's also this sense of accomplishment and pride, right? In that. And he does that a lot. I too is the same way. I too am America, right? I am the darker brother. Right now I have to eat in the kitchen, but tomorrow you will see how beautiful I am. In the meantime, while I'm eating in the kitchen, I will eat and I will grow strong, and when you catch up and realize that we really are equal, then tomorrow I will sit at the table, right? I too am America, right? Now that's a different poem. I'm sort of getting off the topic, but just to show you, even in that poem, Langston Hughes is showing us the duality of the problem of a slave, or, just maybe even, you know, you're in a period of segregation. The bottom line is there's a separation between black and white. The problem is that the black person has to eat in the kitchen, hidden away from society. But the voice of the narrator is saying, I already know the truth. I know that I'm equal. There's no difference between us. I've just got to wait for you to catch up. And I know it will happen. And tomorrow, I too will be America, right? And he expresses that same hope for tomorrow, that hope for change, even in, let's say, a poem like Let America Be America Again, all right? So there's a lot that we could talk about with this poem and other Langston Hughes poems and so much. But, I just wanted to give you a flavor of what the course is going to be like, in terms of, taking very important pieces of literature by very important writers who are expressing something, right, that is important, right? And this is just one of many, and that's sort of the hope and goal for this class, is to discover more literature and to talk about more ideas, and just to discover, you know, the power of literature, right? How it becomes a form of activism, right? And in the course, we cover, a variety of inequalities and injustices that would affect the Black experience, women, the working class, and so on and so forth, right? And then some, right? We've tried to pull a variety of genres and a variety of injustices for different types of people, right? Um, and to be perfectly honest, it was difficult to sort of narrow down, something to make the course. The list is so long, right? There are so many opportunities for studying this, right? Which we will have a continued reading list for, further education, once the course is actually over. Um, and so with that, I would encourage you to take this course, Literature as Activism for Injustice. It is an online course. Um, Everything is there that you need over a few weeks. It's work at your own pace. A variety of learning will be provided. PDF handouts, video lessons, links to videos, links to further reading, links to the literature, exercises that give you the opportunity to think and write what you're learning and contemplating. Right, it's a very comprehensive lesson each week for each piece of literature that gives you an opportunity to really sit with that piece and the material and learn as much as you can from it. And each week a different piece of literature and a different lesson is provided, in an online format, so you can work at your own pace. And we feel it's going to be very interesting, and we would encourage you to, take the course if this speaks to you, right? And probably somewhere around this video, this presentation, there's information on where to go to get more information about the course or to sign up for the course. Everything you need will be provided in and around, I'm sure, this video and this presentation. So check it out, right? We would love to be able, to provide this for you if it's something you feel like you'd be interested in. It speaks to the time. It speaks to a lot of things happening today. It's very relevant, um, and we hope you benefit from it. So check it out. And again, my name is Michael Thomas Kane, the founder of Forgotten Artist Productions, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.